HOA Karen illegally sold my car for using my driveway. Big mistake. I'm the county judge. The sun hung low over Willow Creek, painting the suburban sprawl in hues of amber and gold. It was the kind of neighborhood where every lawn was manicured to perfection, every mailbox stood at precisely the same angle, and the HOA reigned supreme. I'd lived here for 3 years, and I'd learned to navigate the petty tyrannies of the homeowners association with a smile and a nod. But nothing cold have prepared me for Karen. Karen Whitaker was the HOA president, a woman whose very existence seemed to thrive on control. She patrolled the streets in her golf cart, her clipboard ever present, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. She'd issue fines for grass half an inch too long, for garbage cans left out past 8 a.m., for Christmas lights that lingered a day too long. To Karen, Willow Creek wasn't a community, it was her kingdom. And I, Judge Daniel Harper, had unwittingly become her latest target. It started innocently enough. My old pickup truck, a battered but beloved Chevy I'd had since college, was parked in my driveway. I'd been working long hours at the county courthouse, presiding over cases that ranged from petty theft to heated property disputes. The truck hadn't moved in a week, and apparently, that was 1 week too long for Karen. One morning, I found a neon yellow notice taped to my windshield. Violation. Vehicle parked in driveway for more than 72 hours. Remove immediately or face fines. I chuckled at first. The HOA bylaws were strict, but this was absurd. My driveway was my property, and the truck wasn't blocking anything. I tossed the notice in the trash and went about my day, thinking that was the end of it. Oh, how wrong I was. 2 days later, I came home from a grueling session in court to find my driveway empty. My truck gone. My heart sank, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I checked the garage, the street, even the neighbor's yard, thinking maybe I'd lost my mind. But no, the truck was nowhere. That's when I saw the note, taped to my front door in Karen's unmistakable, aggressively neat handwriting. Vehicle removed due to repeated violations. Contact HOA for details. Fury doesn't begin to describe what I felt. I stormed to Karen's house, 3 doors down, where her pristine lawn and perfectly trimmed hedges mocked my rage. She answered the door in a pastel cardigan, her smile as sharp as a blade. "Daniel, I was wondering when you'd show up," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Your truck was an eyesore. The HOA has standards, you know." "An eyesore?" I snapped, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Karen, you had my truck towed? That's my property." She crossed her arms, unfazed. "The bylaws are clear. Vehicles can't sit idle in driveways. It lowers property values. I had it removed for the good of the community." "Where is it?" I demanded. She shrugged, her lips curling into a smug little smirk. "Impound lot, I presume. You'll have to sort it out with them. And don't park it back in your driveway, Daniel. Next time, the fine will be steeper." I stood there, dumbfounded, as she closed the door in my face. I was a county judge, for God's sake. I'd spent years upholding the law, mediating disputes, and ensuring justice. And now, some HOA tyrant thought she could steal my property and lecture me about it? I went home, poured a glass of whiskey, and started digging. The next morning, I called the impound lot. My truck wasn't there. I called every lot in a 50-mile radius. Nothing. By noon, I was on the phone with the sheriff's department, filing a report for a stolen vehicle. The deputy, a gruff man named Tom who I'd known for years, sounded skeptical. "You sure it was stolen, Dan? Maybe the HOA had it towed somewhere private." "Private?" I scoffed. "Tom, it's my truck. They can't just take it." He promised to look into it, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. HOAs had a way of bending the rules in their favor, especially in a place like Willow Creek, where half the town council was probably on Karen's Christmas card list. I wasn't about to wait for answers. I pulled up the HOA bylaws, a 47-page document that read like a dystopian novel, and scoured it for anything that could justify what Karen had done. Spoiler, there was nothing. The bylaws allowed for fines, warnings, even towing in extreme cases, but only after a formal process, written notices, a hearing, a board vote. Karen had skipped all of that. By evening, I was back at her doorstep, armed with the bylaws and a barely contained rage. She opened the door, looking mildly annoyed, as if I were a pesky salesman. "What now, Daniel?" "I want my truck back," I said, holding up the bylaws. You had no legal authority to take it. No notice, no hearing, no vote. You're in violation of your own rules." Her eyes narrowed, but her smile didn't falter. "You're a judge, so you should know better than to threaten me. I acted within my rights as HOA president. If you don't like it, take it up with the board." "Oh, I will," I said, my voice low. "And I'll take it up with the county, too. You don't get to steal my property and hide behind your clipboard." She laughed, a sharp, grating sound that made my skin crawl. "Good luck with that, Judge. The board's on my side. Always has been." That night, I couldn't sleep. My truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was a piece of my history. I'd driven it cross-country after law school, hauled furniture for my first apartment, taken my daughter, Ellie, camping in it before she moved to college. Losing it felt like losing a friend. But more than that, Karen's smugness, her absolute certainty that she was untouchable, lit a fire in me. I wasn't just going to get my truck back. I was going to make her regret ever crossing me. The next day, I started gathering evidence. I knocked on neighbors' doors, asking if anyone had seen what happened. Most were too scared of Karen to talk, but Mrs. Delaney, a sweet old widow who lived across the street, was different. She invited me in for tea, her hands trembling as she poured. "I saw it, Daniel," she whispered, glancing at the window as if Karen might be lurking outside. A tow truck came early, before dawn. Karen was there, directing them. She said something about teaching you a lesson. My blood ran cold. "Did you hear where they took it?" Mrs. Delaney shook her head. "No, but there's something else. I heard her on the phone later, talking to someone about selling a truck. She mentioned a junkyard out on Route 17. Selling my truck? The audacity hit me like a punch. I thanked Mrs. Delaney, promising to keep her name out of it, and drove straight to the junkyard. Sure enough, there was my Chevy, sitting in a corner lot, its hood propped open like a wounded animal. The owner, a greasy-haired man named Carl, looked nervous when I introduced myself as a judge. "Look, man, I bought it fair and square," he stammered, showing me a bill of sale. The signature at the bottom? Karen Whitaker. I felt the world tilt. Karen hadn't just towed my truck, sold it. My property, my memories, reduced to a $500 transaction at a junkyard. I took photos, got a copy of the bill of sale, and drove back to Willow Creek, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. This wasn't just about a truck anymore. This was personal. Back home, I called an emergency meeting of the HOA board. As a homeowner, I had the right to request one, though Karen tried to block it, claiming it was unnecessary. The board, a group of 5 nervous-looking neighbors who clearly regretted ever signing up, agreed to meet at the community center that weekend. I spent the next 2 days preparing, pulling every legal string I could. I wasn't just a homeowner, I was a judge, and I knew exactly how to play this game. The meeting was a spectacle. Karen sat at the head of the table, her clipboard like a scepter, her smile as smug as ever. The other board members fidgeted, avoiding my gaze. I stood, holding a folder thick with documents, and laid out my case. The illegal towing, the forged bill of sale, the violation of HOA bylaws and state law. I presented Mrs. Delaney's testimony, anonymized, to protect her, the junkyard's bill of sale, and a detailed breakdown of Karen's overreach. The room was silent, the air heavy with tension. Karen, to her credit, didn't flinch. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice calm but cutting. Daniel's truck was a blight on the neighborhood. I acted in the best interest of Willow Creek. If he'd followed the rules, none of this would have happened. "Rules?" I shot back, slamming the bylaws on the table. "You didn't follow a single one. You stole my property, Karen. You sold it. That's not HOA policy, that's a crime." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a quiet man named Greg who'd always seemed intimidated by Karen, cleared his throat. Maybe we should vote on this. You know, to clarify things." Karen's smile faltered for the first time. "A vote? There's nothing to vote on. I'm the president. I made the call." But Greg wasn't backing down. "Actually, Karen, the bylaws say any board member can call for a vote on disputed actions. I'm calling for one." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's face turned red, her composure cracking. "You can't be serious," she hissed. "After everything I've done for this neighborhood?" That's when the twist came, and it wasn't from me. Greg stood, his hands trembling but his voice steady. "Karen, we've all been scared of you for years. You bully everyone, homeowners, the board, even the kids who play too loud. I'm done. I motion to remove you as HOA president. The room went dead silent. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Another board member, a woman named Lisa who'd always seemed like Karen's lapdog, raised her hand. I second the motion. What followed was chaos. Karen screamed about betrayal, about how she'd built this community, about how we'd all regret this. But the vote was unanimous. Karen was out. I didn't expect that. I'd come to get my truck back, not to topple an HOA dictator. But as I watched Karen storm out, her clipboard abandoned on the table, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. The board promised to reimburse me for the truck, which I retrieved from the junkyard the next day. It needed repairs, but it was mine again. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, I got a call from Tom, the deputy. "Dan, you're not gonna believe this," he said, his voice grim. "We looked into Karen's finances. Turns out, your truck wasn't the first thing she sold." I gripped the phone, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" "She's been running a side hustle," Tom said. "Selling cars, lawnmowers, anything she could get her hands on from violators. We found a paper trail leading to half a dozen other homeowners. She's looking at felony charges." I sat back, stunned. Karen, the queen of Willow Creek, wasn't just a control freak, she was a crook. The revelation hit the neighborhood like a bombshell. People started coming forward with their own stories. Missing bikes, confiscated grills, even a boat that vanished from a backyard. Karen had been playing God for years, and we'd all let her. But the real gut punch came a month later. I was in my chambers, preparing for a case, when my clerk handed me a file. It was a civil suit, filed by Karen Whitaker against me, claiming defamation and emotional distress. She alleged I'd orchestrated a witch hunt to ruin her reputation. I almost laughed, but then I saw the plaintiff's address, a women's correctional facility. Karen had been arrested, her empire crumbled, and still, she was fighting. I drove home that night, my truck rumbling beneath me, and parked it in my driveway, right where Karen hated it. I looked at it, battered but unbroken, and thought about justice, not the kind I dispensed in court, but the kind that comes when people finally stand up. Willow Creek was quieter now, the HOA board humbled, the neighbors braver. But as I walked inside, I couldn't shake the bitterness. Karen's reign was over, but the scars she'd left in me, on the community, would linger. Justice had been served, but at what cost? The days following Karen's arrest were surreal. Willow Creek, once a place of rigid order, felt like a town waking from a bad dream. Neighbors who'd barely spoken to each other in years now gathered on porches, swapping stories of Karen's tyranny. The HOA board, now led by Greg, issued a public apology and promised reforms. My truck, freshly repaired, sat proudly in my driveway, a silent rebuke to the woman who'd tried to erase it. But the victory tasted bitter, like ash on the tongue. Karen's lawsuit against me hung like a storm cloud, and the weight of what she'd denied me, to others, gnawed at my soul. I tried to focus on work. The courthouse was my sanctuary, where I could bury myself in cases and pretend the world made sense. But even there, Karen's shadow lingered. Word of her crimes had spread, and every time I walked into a courtroom, I caught whispers from clerks and attorneys. "Heard about the judge's truck?" they'd say, half amused, half awed. I hated it. I wasn't a victim or a hero, I was just a man who wanted his damn truck back. One morning, as I was reviewing a property dispute case, my clerk, Sarah, knocked on my door. "Judge Harper, there's someone here to see you," she said, her voice hesitant. "She says it's about the Whitaker case." I sighed, expecting another reporter sniffing for a story. "Who is it?" Sarah bit her lip. "She says her name's Ellie. Your daughter." My heart stopped. Ellie hadn't been home in over a year, not since she started her master's program in Chicago. We talked on the phone, sure, but our relationship had been strained since her mom and I divorced. She'd always been closer to her mother, and I'd let the distance grow, too busy with work to bridge it. What was she doing here? I told Sarah to send her in. Ellie walked through the door, looking older than I remembered, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes sharp but tired. She carried a backpack slung over one shoulder, and for a moment, I saw the little girl who'd ride in my truck, singing off-key to country songs. Then she spoke, and the illusion shattered. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" she said, dropping her bag on the floor. "I saw the news about some HOA lady stealing your truck. Why didn't you tell me?" I leaned back in my chair, caught off guard. It's complicated, Ellie. I didn't want to worry you. You've got your studies. Studies? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think I care about my thesis when my dad's in the middle of some suburban crime drama? I flew down here because I was worried. And then I find out you're being sued. I winced. The lawsuit wasn't public knowledge yet, or so I'd thought. How'd you hear about that? Mrs. Delaney called me, Ellie said, crossing her arms. She's been texting me updates, Dad. She said you're acting like everything's fine, but it's not. This woman's trying to ruin you. I blinked, stunned. Mrs. Delaney, the sweet old widow who'd tipped me off about the junkyard, had been talking to my daughter? I didn't know whether to be grateful or mortified. Ellie, I've got it under control. Karen's in jail. Her case is falling apart. Under control? Ellie interrupted, her voice rising. Dad, you're a judge. You can't just brush this off. People are talking, and not just about the truck. They're saying you used your position to take her down. That hit me like a punch. Used my position? Ellie, I followed the law. She stole my property. She stole from half the neighborhood. I know. Ellie said, softer now. But you're not just a homeowner, Dad. You're a public figure. People see what they want to see. And this Karen lady? She's spinning it like you're the bully. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Karen, even from behind bars, was playing the victim. And worse, it was working. Ellie sat down, her anger giving way to something else, concern, maybe even fear. I just don't want you to lose everything over this, she said quietly. Not your job, not your reputation, not us. That last word broke me. I'd spent years building walls, convincing myself I was fine alone. But seeing Ellie here, willing to fly across the country for me, made me realize how much I'd let slip away. I reached across the desk, taking her hand. You're not losing me, kid. I promise. She nodded, but her eyes were wet. We sat there for a while, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. For the first time in years, I felt like a father again. The next week, I met with my lawyer, a sharp woman named Carla who'd handled cases for judges before. She laid out Karen's lawsuit, defamation, emotional distress, even a claim that I'd abused my judicial authority. It was a desperate move, Carla said, but not without teeth. She's got no evidence, Carla assured me. But she's banking on public sympathy. The media's eating it up. HOA president wronged by powerful judge. We need to counter this fast. I agreed to a deposition, hoping to shut it down before it reached a courtroom. But as I prepared, another twist emerged. Carla was digging into Karen's finances when she found something odd. A series of payments to a man named Victor Ruiz, a local realtor with a rap sheet for fraud. Victor, it turned out, was Karen's silent partner. He'd been the one moving the stolen goods, cars, boats, anything Karen confiscated, through a network of shady dealers. The junkyard was just one stop, one of many. Their operation had netted them over $200,000 in 2 years. Carla grinned as she showed me the bank records. This isn't just a smoking gun, Dan, it's a bazooka. We've got her dead to rights on organized crime charges. Her lawsuit's about to blow up in her face. I should have felt triumphant, but all I could think about was the neighbors who'd lost so much. Karen hadn't just stolen their property, stolen their peace, their trust. And Victor? He was just another predator, profiting off her cruelty. I told Carla to coordinate with the sheriff's department. I wanted justice, not just for me but for everyone. The deposition was held in a gray conference room at the courthouse. Karen sat across from me, her prison jumpsuit a far cry from her pastel cardigans. Her lawyer, a nervous man who kept adjusting his glasses, tried to paint her as a vindictive judge wielding power against a well-meaning citizen. But Carla was her own force of nature. She presented the bank records, the bill of sale, and a sworn statement from Victor, who'd flipped on Karen in exchange for a plea deal. Karen's facade cracked. You're lying, she screamed, slamming her hands on the table. I was protecting Willow Creek. You people don't appreciate what I did. The judge overseeing the deposition, a colleague named Margaret, raised an eyebrow. Ms. Whitaker, control yourself. These documents suggest you were running a criminal enterprise, not a neighborhood watch. Karen's lawyer stammered, but the damage was done. By the end of the session, her lawsuit was crumbling, and the DA was preparing to add racketeering charges to her rap sheet. I walked out of the room, my head high, but my heart heavy. Justice was coming, but it wouldn't undo the damage. Back in Willow Creek, the neighborhood was healing, slowly. The HOA board slashed its bylaws, focusing only on essentials. Greg organized a block party, the first in years, where neighbors laughed and shared stories without looking over their shoulders. Ellie stayed for it, helping Mrs. Delaney set up tables and teasing me about my grilling skills. For a moment, it felt like home again. But the final blow came a month later, at Karen's trial. I wasn't required to attend, but I went anyway, needing closure. The courtroom was packed neighbors, reporters, even a few curious lawyers. Karen took the stand, her voice trembling as she spun her tale of martyrdom. "I only wanted to keep our community beautiful," she said, tears streaming down her face. Judge Harper turned it into a vendetta. The prosecutor dismantled her, piece by piece. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, witness testimonies, even security footage from the junkyard. But what sealed her fate was Victor's testimony. He took the stand, his eyes darting nervously, and described how Karen had recruited him, promising easy money if he helped her clean up the neighborhood. The jury didn't take long to convict her: 5 years for theft, fraud, and racketeering. As the gavel fell, I looked at Karen. She wasn't smug anymore, just small, broken, a woman who'd built a throne on lies and lost everything. I wanted to feel vindicated, but all I felt was pity. She'd hurt so many, but in the end, she'd hurt herself most of all. I drove home in my truck, Ellie beside me. She decided to stay in Willow Creek for the summer, working remotely while we rebuilt what we'd lost. As we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded, but my throat was tight. "Yeah, kid. Just tired." She squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing. Not just for you, but for everyone." Maybe she was right. But as I looked at my truck, parked where it belonged, I couldn't shake the ache in my chest. Justice had prevailed, but at a cost. Karen's reign had torn Willow Creek apart, exposing the fragility of trust, the ease with which power corrupts. I'd won, but the scars remained. That night, I sat on my porch, a beer in hand, watching the stars over Willow Creek. The neighborhood was quieter now, freer, but it would never be the same. And neither would I. What do you think? Was justice truly served, or did the cost outweigh the victory? Share your thoughts. Did Daniel do the right thing, or could he have handled it differently? Was Karen a villain, a victim of her own obsession, or something in between? Let's hear your perspective on what's right and wrong in this tangled tale of suburban vengeance.